All right, so we're going to go over on our agenda what's new with logic. We're going to compare some old versus new operators. We'll also go over the basic UI settings, what to look for, and also do some side-by-side comparisons so you can see the difference of what we used to do and what we're doing now. And then we'll also do a live demo of all the new logic features so you can find everything. The most important thing from this type of webinar is just to know where everything is. And so we will do our best to be able to provide you with all of that information as well as resources that you can go back and review and look at while you are learning the new logic. What you'll probably find is that it is a lot easier than it used to be, but it's just a matter of getting used to the new look and feel. And so we'll talk about the things that you should be looking for. And I strongly suggest after this webinar to go ahead and start practicing with it and trying to use it. And don't wait until you have a brand new survey to figure out how to do the new logic. I would probably go and jump in there as much as you can and just get your hands dirty and try it and go for it. So let's jump in. What is new? So we've got quite a bit of stuff. Normally I don't like to put too many things on a screen, but it is important to cover everything. So the biggest thing is just the general UI, UX improvements in terms of the look and feel. Our goal is to make it easier and faster to use, as well as it being able to support more complex logic setup options. It does have a lot of functionality improvements where you now can branch to unlimited different questions in the survey. In the past, you can only do a few, probably 2 or less, but now you can do as many as you need. You also have unlimited criteria conditions, and so what that means is when you're telling the survey that if someone picks this, they have to go here, or if they had answered these things, you can define what those criteria are, and there is no limit. My colleague, Laquinda, actually tested it, and he said he did over 99, and he still didn't get a limitation, which is wonderful to hear. So you can really, really stretch it out as you need. And then the third one is that you can edit and reuse existing criteria. Before, you would create the criteria, but if it was no longer useful for the survey, you would delete and create a different one. This time, you can actually go into the existing one and make changes to the existing criteria. So we'll show you where and how to do that. Some new things that we've added includes the fact that you can do logic based on like the number of multi-select questions answered in a survey. We used to do that with scoring, but now in a multi-select question, you can actually do that through the validation tool. Other things you can also do now is that logic you can do based on questions not answered, or logic based on questions not displayed. So that means in the past, logic was always based on what things were answered and were displayed, but it left out those that didn't answer or didn't display. So if you want to do like a follow-up question in case somebody missed or refused or just forgot to respond on something, then you can go back and make sure to ask that question down the road. So that criteria is now available for you to use. The third thing is that there are new comparison operators that and supported logic options. So that means, in addition to not answered, not displayed, there's so much more. So we'll go over that list here. And then with updating variables, I don't know if any of you guys have used custom variables in the survey, but in the past you had to put a branching logic or a page break, and that was kind of a silly thing. So we cut those steps out, and now you can just go ahead and apply it and do it really quickly. So we'll show that as well. And then the last thing is some performance improvements, and that includes logic conditioning checks on it, just making sure everything looks good. You can test to see if there's anything that's broken or not broken ahead of time, and we'll show you where to do that. And then you don't need to add any additional blank screens or anything like fancy. So we really wanted to make it as simple as possible. So let's go into that. A big question from the audience that we've gotten and also from our team is, what about the old logic? What about the stuff that you've added to your surveys in the past? The good thing is that the old logic is still intact, it's still in your existing surveys. The only way that you'll see the new surveys is with the logic. With the new one is anytime you create a brand new survey. So you'll see the new logic in brand new surveys. So anything that you had before stays the same. No need to worry about those. So if you're concerned about that, concerned about things being broken, we spent a lot more time Q&Ing that section. So we're pretty proud of making sure that that transition is as smooth as possible. So here's a couple things to keep an eye out for. We kind of talked about a few of them, but I thought it's important because when it comes to learning something new, it's always all about just knowing, especially when it's a new concept or new ideas and things, it's just knowing where your resources, who do you go to for help, where do you look for certain things. So these are just some things that I would suggest, like to remember. So back in the days, you can only do branch skip logic on 2 questions, now you can do it to unlimited. So remember that. We didn't support the logic where you can pick, a number of multi-select and validate that. So now you can do a forced logic validation. And then criteria limitations, back in the days we only did 5. Now you can do unlimited, and then of course, and then variable updates without the logic criteria, page break, and all that stuff. Now you don't even need that. And then limited logic application to matrix tables, and now you can apply a lot of matrix table logics options. So it's pretty extensive there as well. So those are things to keep an eye out for. Other things you can see is that, when you, another thing that's kind of cool is like if you want to do a type to search tool, this is actually one of Laquinder's ideas that he suggested in the developer's ticket, which was really cool. Basically, if you have a lot of answers, you can type in instead of searching through a list of answer options, and then that will help you. So it's kind of like a Google for your search for your questions and your logic. So keep an eye out for that. And then also look for improved stability, especially if you're going to copy a survey with logic. A lot of times, you do still need to check it. That's a recommendation no matter what. But in the past, there were times if you added more complex logic like JavaScript, things could break if you're trying to copy the survey. But now that is not the case. You can now have a lot more stability, and the logic does work and copy over properly. The last one is the tool settings to review, to test and manage the logic criteria. They have some additional logic tools inside there where you can test, review, and make sure that the logic, there's not anything broken. And probably the last thing I didn't put on here, but just look for some new drop-down boxes and click through those and see what those are. That would be helpful during your exploration time. So here's the logic criteria comparison operators. In black is the existing, and then we added a whole bunch of new ones. So it starts with, ends with, greater than, less than, etc. is blank, it's not blank. All those different things you can now add those into your survey. You can include those. So that is quite extensive. In the past, we would create a JavaScript to cover these, but now it's all point and click logic. And here's the comparison operators in the field, just kind of quick screenshot. You can see to the left here, we have the not answered and not displayed. And then on this page, this is the comparison operators available on the open-ended question. So you can see it's equals, contains, does not contain, starts with, ends with, is not blank, etc. And so that's where you would find that. So let's look at the remodeled logic UI. So if you've ever remodeled a home, it's a lot of work but we always see the potential, and then when the outcome looks amazing, you're just really proud of how far you've come. So let's take a look at here. So with the old skip logic, this is what it looked like. So on the left side, you would click the logic, and then you would go and click on where you want to branch to. So it moved from left to right, and then you go down, and then you save your logic. But in the new one, everything, the logic options is under the drop down, and then everything moves from left to right. So you go from Portland, answer option, click on what type of branching you want to do, what question, and then there you can also include your piping text and also a variable assignment if you need. So everything moves from left to right. You'll see a lot more drop-down options, and then of course if you do pick and a question, you can type it in. If it's like far down the list, then you can make it a lot easier to search for as well. So we'll go over that live, but I wanted to do side-by-side comparison. So let's look at old versus new compound delayed branching. We actually removed the word delayed out of our branching, but you can see here, you would set up your criteria, set up a name, and then add if conditions, and then select the question or whatever condition you add, and then add additional ones if you need, and then you set up your logic, and you also were able to put only 2 branching options. But now that's not the case anymore. So now with this compound branching, we got rid of the word delayed and just called it compound branching. And so this is where you would find it under the drop down, and then everything moves from left to right, and you would add the name and the criteria. So that is pretty much this area is not displayed. So this is where you update your comparison operators and the answer, and then you can see that this example has various criteria. So what I have here is that if they answer Portland, then they go to the Portland restaurant. If they answer Gresham, they go to the Gresham restaurant. If they go to Beaverton, they go to the Beaverton restaurant. And so the criteria is set ahead of time. And then you can also see on the right side of this is now a lot cleaner, in which you can do a compact or open up the view so you can look at the criteria in detail, and then you can include your criteria down here and then add your default logic. So again, you pick the branching type or the logic type, and then you read from left to right. In terms of setting up the criteria, the things that you have to do isn't any different, but how you do it is different. And then again, do look for any drop down, triangles or buttons, and review those and make sure you add the additional criteria as you need. So I pushed it to 3 here, but you can definitely do way more if you need. So let's look at the old versus new logic for show hide question. And so in the past, it was just, pick that, add your criteria, which is the same thing as we've done before. And then you just have the second step, which is do nothing or hide or show, and then you save your logic. This time, it's a little bit different, where you will pick the logic and then you move if and you set up your criteria, and then you can move through the criteria. It says if question is this, it's highly dissatisfied, then you can add a option for that, and then you can also add an and or, and then save that as well. So we'll jump through that. And then show hide answer logic was very similar as well, except you couldn't really do too much in terms of how to, in terms of what you display and how you display it. So the difference here between the old one and the new one is that now you can do a show by default, hide by default, and then do show high criteria answers based off of different compound criteria that you've created earlier. And it's pretty impressive in terms of what it can do. It can be very extensive. So you can have different criteria for different answer options. And then also with the old versus new scoring, this is actually the new scoring. But back in the days, you had to go in and use the, pick the answer options, add the score, but then you could only add one score and do branching, but now you can do multiple scoring and multiple branching on scores. So you can create various scores. So I've got 2 of them down here. So, and what you can see is that, if I have a score between 1, then it goes to this answer. And then if I have a score between -2 and 0, it goes to a different question type. So lots of different things that you can do inside here versus before you can only do one kind of branching. Now you can do multiple types of branching with score. So again, in the past we did that with JavaScript, but now it's all point and click. Here's just the old versus new extraction. So you can see the single select versus multi-select option here is the same. And then you save it. But now, instead, you can see that with the extraction, we're moving from left to right again. And then you select the type of question, and then you can extract more question types, as well as with adding additional criteria. So that helps a lot. So it hasn't changed too much, but I think just the look of it is significantly cleaner to add and update. And then dynamic comments, that's just any follow-up quick comments on close-ended questions. This is the old way. And this is the new one. So you can see it's just a lot cleaner from left to right, and then you can add your dynamic text box. And here's the old quota control. So you can see it's not too different, I don't think, but just the overall look and feel, it's just a lot cleaner, as you can tell. And it's, you're moving from left to right. And here's with the old update variables. In the past, you can see you had to do a skip logic to add a variable and update it, and you would do it in the branching logic. And if you had other types of logic already applied, I mean, it makes it a little bit harder. But now, update variables is completely on its own, and then you can just go in and pick it as a logic type, and then go in and customize it and save it as you go along. So no extra things. It doesn't have to be applied to a specific question. You can just update it or to a specific logic type. You can just update it along with other types of logic. So you can put multiple kinds of logic. It'll support custom variables no matter what on every question. So let's go ahead and jump into the live demo. I thought it'd be kind of fun to use an example. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I know that New York is popular for their pizza, but Portland is also very popular with pizza as well. And so I thought it would be fun to pick my neighborhood pizza joint called Pizza Jerk and just say that they're doing customer satisfaction survey, and they're trying to look at the Pizza Jerk restaurant experience and see what they can improve. And we're going to look at how to set up location comparisons, how customers from Portland compared to Beaverton customers, and then they also want to show and hide questions and answers based on location and ratings of services, etc. So let's jump into this. Some best practices I like to tell you guys about when it comes to setting up your logic. And most people should know this already, but it's a good review, especially if you're brand new to logic. First thing in the survey planning is to make sure to identify segments that you want to target, because that will help you with writing particular questions that will address those targets. The second one is obviously to write specific questions for those segments. And then the third one, before you even program it, you probably do this on a Word doc or maybe even on a whiteboard with your team to map the logic workflow externally. It's just so you know if someone answers here, you can like literally write something or draw a picture to say, hey, these people should go to these questions. This one will flow, and it, you know, it's kind of reminds me of, you know, marking flight paths, so to speak. So where are these people going to go to next? So you'll be in charge of that outside. Second one is all about programming it. This is when you are ready to go live and program your survey in the tool. So the first thing to do is to build all your questions in QuestionPro first. So if you have a 50 question survey, I would still say, yes, keep going and programming every single question. And then the next thing is to add your logic and survey settings. That's the second piece that you'll want to do after that. And then you want to test it out as thoroughly as possible to make sure that the logic is matching with the workflow that you've mapped out externally. And then after that, the third thing is to apply any security settings. So that means you need to add a password or protection, etc. Or if you only want people to take the survey once versus multiple times, do those things after the logic has been green lighted. Third thing is always testing. I usually recommend to test while programming, but also doing a test immediately after the programming is completed, and then just doing it by section, and then doing it as a whole, and then making sure that your team has greenlit everything before you officially launch. And I would suggest the second piece, use real people to test. I know that sounds like a no-brainer, but it truly is a very important thing to do. Let's go ahead and check just, all right. I just had a quick question from LaQuinder here. Oh, LaQuinder actually told me, thought this would be nice to share with everybody, that the new logic can be applied to any surveys, including the old ones. Okay, that's good. So that's probably one thing I didn't make very clear with the old surveys. So if you have an old survey and you want to apply the new logic will be available for you to add. So just a quick heads up on that. So if you're worried about logic on an old survey that you need to update or change, the new logic tools will be available there. What I was saying earlier is that the old logic, what was there is still there. It's just how you set up the new stuff or change new stuff is going to look different. So hopefully that clears everything up. Thank you for the quick reminder there, LaQuinder. I'm glad I have my cell phone that I can read instead of switching back and forth. So let's go back. The third thing, make all changes prior to the official launch. That is true. What you'll want to do is just make sure, because once you go live with the survey and you realize you have to make a change and it's live, then it does affect any responses that you get. So you want to make sure to make all those changes prior to your launch. Fourth one is analysis. In the analysis process, you'll want to make sure to create segments and filters based on your existing logic criteria. So that just means, making sure that your segments match. The filters that you create will identify with the targeted audience. So you can say like, yeah, I'm looking for males in this between the ages of 25 and 34 that eat pizza twice a week. Then you can target those people and see how they respond versus, families of 4 that eat pizza once a week. And you can see how they respond. So those are things that you can set up ahead of time. You don't have to necessarily wait until you get responses to do those. So that's something you can think about. And of course, with reporting, you just want to make sure that all reporting on all data collected, you'll have those identified and have those logic and criteria applied. You can also customize and automate the reports based on the logic and segments that you've set up. So if you're working with, like managers of the different pizza locations at Pizza Jerk, then you can send, a survey results and report to ones in Portland, ones in Gresham, ones in Hillsborough, and give them the important information that they need to make changes and improve their pizza and their service to their customers. So let's jump into the tool itself. So here I have a survey that's already built, and basically what I've done is I pretty much built the survey already from scratch, and so just kind of pointing some things out in terms of where you can go. So of course, to get started, again, just build out your survey, and then after that, you start applying your logic. So here, I just want to show you an example. What city do you live in? This question is actually an answer question, so people will be typing in, and then we can add an update variable example with no page breaks. So it feels, the flow feels really good. Oops. Let me go ahead and move that. So here, all I did was I went and I opened up logic, and here's the list of all the different types of logic available with this question type, and I just picked update variables. And then what I did was I applied a variable number, in this case, custom 2, and then I marked what type of open-ended text is it, and so this is a list that you can pick from, so that if you the better you can tag or your open-ended responses, the better you can use it for data. So that's why we have it here. So you can mark it as a city, because we're asking them what city do they live in, and then you can save that. And then what this can do, after you've applied it, you can then use it in the survey. And so I've asked, how many years have you lived in Portland or lived in the city that they typed? So what you can do is you can use this code. If you guys are familiar with the custom variable coding, it's always plus sign and then the squiggly marks. I don't know really the name of it. So if someone can tell me what those are, I just call it the squigglies, and then just type in the custom number and then close the bracket. I think it's brackets maybe. And then you have that inside there. And then what you can do, as you can see, you don't have to apply logic, but what you can do in here is you can update the settings, and you can even pre-populate things. So let me open this up so I can show you what that means. So one thing I added, so I can indicate how many years you've lived in, I've added a suffix to the text box, so they can tell me that they've lived there for 3 years or 0.5 years or so on and so forth. The other thing they can also do here is you can also pre-populate the information. So, if you want to add a answer text that includes, Portland 5 years, you can also do that. So just to do a quick preview what that looks like. So you can see, I typed in Portland, next question, I can go to the question and then set that up here. And so that's pretty much how you can review that and see. And so I recommend to, when you are applying your logic, then that will be available for you with a pre-populated variable. Next one is just the skip logic, how to set that up. So after you've created your survey, just click on logic and then select skip logic. And then again, you're moving here from left to right. So if they said, Portland, we can ask them, how long have they been living or how long have they been dining, and then save it, and so on and so forth. So that's one way that you can do it. And then if you are doing like a compound delayed branching, compound delayed branching basically is just branching. We're not using the word delayed anymore, so we're dropping that. So it's just compound now. We're just asking from this question, based off of their answer previously, then you can see the criteria, which I'll update. So I've added a criteria, I've written the name Portland, and then the question, and then which question is it? So if I want a different question, this is where you can see like the Google search, then I can type in the word Portland. I can see what other questions have that. So that should help with finding the question you want to go to. And then here, that is the question I'm having the criteria set, and then I'll go ahead and save that. You can also see here, if I want to add additional criteria, I can click through here and I can do an and or. I can add additional variables, geolocation, etc. And then pull, so if I want to do something else and update or edit my criteria by including additional criteria, I can do that. And if I don't, I can just go ahead and delete that. And then once that's set up, then you can go and set up the logic as needed so that it will move accordingly. And then you can update your default logic from there and save it. So the same ones with compound branching here, I've done the same thing. Basically set up a criteria with the word Gresham, and then when they answered which location are you completing the survey for, and they selected Gresham as the option, then they would be sent to that one. And so on and so forth. And then they would move forward. So let's go ahead and take a look at an extraction logic. So you can see here, I picked extraction, and then from here, I pick the type of question that I want to include. Or you can also do a reverse extraction, and then you can save it. And what this does, it creates, you can see XTR, that's a short for extraction, and then I have a ranking question. And then you can preview this. A trick that LaQuinda actually showed me is that if you want to make sure that these are, that maybe you want to put this question in a different place or something like that, you can actually go into the logic, and instead of keeping it at extraction, you can actually move it to a different skip logic and do something different, actually break it. And then that will help with actually changing this down the road. So you still can use it, but it doesn't have to be immediately after, which is pretty neat. So if you're interested in learning more about that, definitely reach out to him. He's there. I see a lot of questions coming through, so that's great. And so that is the extraction logic with the answer here. And then you can see that I didn't apply one because we have the logic shown from there. So this one here is the show hide answer. This is where you click on the logic, and then you'll see the show hide option. And the show hide by default is show option by default or hide by default unless you added a type of criteria. So in here, what I created was actually a pretty intricate criteria. So let's go ahead and just open it up here just to see. So I use an existing one. So if they answered if they are doing the survey for Portland, then the criteria that I'm going to hide is somewhat dissatisfied, somewhat satisfied. And then the only answers they get to pick is highly satisfied, neutral, or highly dissatisfied, etc. And then I did the same thing with like questions. So you could see that we have different options for this one. So if it's the same answer, which is question, but then they can go in and edit. So here I'm hiding highly dissatisfied and highly satisfied, and the only answers they get to pick are these three. And then the one with Beaverton, I did pretty much the same thing where I created, I use an existing criteria, but in terms of what they get to see is completely different than the other people that answered. So this is pretty complex and different. And so this is where you pick the answer here, and then the criteria that you want to set up, you could just pick. So here I'm hiding somewhat dissatisfied, neutral, somewhat satisfied, and they only get to pick between highly satisfied or highly dissatisfied and highly satisfied, and so on and so forth. So that is a really cool thing that you can see that you can apply and be very intricate, and it's all point and click, which is really wonderful. Let's go ahead and scroll down. We'll look at force criteria. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to Portland, but I highly recommend checking out the pizza scene. Like I said earlier, this is just an example of the menu that you can get at my local pizza place. And I'm just asking them, which of these signature pizzas sound tasty to you? And what I am going to ask them is I'm going to validate. So now in the past, if you wanted to do a validation, you had to do a scoring. But now, instead of doing that, where I only need them to pick at least 3 out of the 10, and if they don't, then, obviously, we just want to force that. So here is where you can get that done and click on validation, and you want to do a forced response, and you want to have at least, at most, exactly. So in this case, I want them to pick at least 3 of these places and pick, out of the number that you have here. So that is where you can force a criteria. And let's go ahead and take a look at another question type. So skip logic with looping. And that's only when you are using a select all that apply, but a looping would answer. So say, for instance, I'm asking, what options would you like to see at Pizza Jerk in the future? Select all that apply. So I'm talking about mobile ordering apps, robot servers, dessert bar, swimming pool. I know that's kind of silly, but in this case, we'll just open up logic, and then you can see with the logic, it moves from left to right again, but the only difference is on the right side, you'll have a looping option. And what this will do is it'll allow us to ask and move these questions, and you can pipe this text information into a follow-up so that you can get an answer about these particular answer options, get more detailed information about their attitudes and thoughts about these answers. And then you'll set up a default branching, which will help with, after they're done with the loop, helps them break out of the loop. So that's what you want to do. And then once you've set those things up, then you can save the logic. And then you can see how this looks like. So what you want to do with any kind of looping, you'll add a piping text code. So similar, with the $, squiggly brackets, and then piping text and then that will loop all the answers they picked into here, and then they can choose between the 2 options. So let's go ahead and take a look at the a different option here. Just look at a matrix question and see. So what we had done here, I had actually done like a break where we can do I picked basically setting up a show hide question based on the matrix responses. So from this question above here. So, and it's pretty particular, so I'll kind of walk through this a little slower, but just to show you what you can do with matrix tables now and with the show hide. Let me not scroll up like that. That's kind of weird. So what you can do is you pick the show hide question, and I'll do show by default, and then instead of a hide, and then what you can do, the enable dynamic on page basically means that if you turn this on, it'll show it, but then if they pick something, things will start to disappear. So that's what that is. And so what you'll do here is you'll set up your criteria, and the difference between doing a logic criteria on a single question type versus a matrix is that you have a lot more answers that you have to apply criteria to. And so this is what I have set up here. So I'm looking at each of these questions and then basically going through all of the answers that needs to go with that. So first one here is, please rank the following in terms of the friendly staff, and then answering if they have at least neutral to least important. I'm going to go ahead and hide that question type. And then I also have it for, I've typed in question, rank the following importance when it comes to the cleanliness of the restaurant. And so you can see that with the matrix table, we're breaking it down as if it is its own question in a criteria so that you can apply and say, okay, well, for like quality of food, then this one you can do is not displayed or is not answered, and then you can select. So in this case, for people that say it's at least important or somewhat important, I'm going to have that show as an option that they can rank what is their important things in this particular question type. And so again, with matrix tables, when we apply logic to matrix, it looks at every single line as its own question. So if you have a matrix table with 5 things that people need to pick in terms of a scale, and you want to do logic on that, then think of those as 5 separate questions. And so you can get pretty intricate. So you can see here, once again, you can do and or. In this case, I'm just going to use the question and then for this one, I'm going to have it look at the matrix table for menu pricing and value. And then on the right, looking at those answer options, I'm basically, saying anyone who's neutral to least important, I'm not going to ask them to rank that particular piece. So it's pretty cool when you set this up. So when if a person had said, friendly staff and pricing is valuable, but then quality of food is not as important, then those questions, even when you do it like this, actually remove those from the list down below. So that's pretty interesting because it'll treat it as if it's each line here, each row as its own question. So I wanted to show you guys that so you can see how intricate that could be. And I think you guys will be very excited about it as well. Another one here, multi-score branching on logic. If you're using a net promoter, like maybe you want to ask follow-up questions for detractors, and also with promoters, and or passes, and you want to do something different. So what you can do is apply a branching score. So just select score, and then apply your score values and turn on your custom scaling, and then you can add those weights on your report. And what you can do here is if the score is, the question score is this, then between 6 and 7, which is the promoters, then you can ask them a follow-up question. And then you can also, if you have passes between, and you've defined it as 4 and 5, then you can do, what are some suggestions? And then, of course, with, you'll see here, you can do either total score or question score. Total score just means that any scores that you have throughout the entire survey up until this question can meet through here. But in this case, it should be question score. It's 1 to 3. They're my detractors, and then I'll have them do another follow-up question. So that's pretty extensive. And then you can also add a default branching. So if they didn't answer it or something like that, where do they go? Usually if you just keep it on no, it just goes to the next question. However, if you have, you can also indicate where you'd like to go as well. So go ahead and save that logic. And then here, this is a show hide answer on a no answer criteria. So if you didn't collect an answer or is not answered, then this is where you'll see the new comparison options. It's not displayed, not answered. Then you can use that logic as a way to set up your criteria and decide what you'd like to do. So let's go ahead and look at one more. I'm going to go ahead and do